Okay, good evening guys. My name is Joseph Floyd, in case any of you don't know. I do a lot of useless things around town. So one of them is the Menagerie Motion Kinetic Derby, which is hosted annually. The third annual event will be this coming Saturday at 10 a.m. So tonight's presentation is actually about a specific entry, which is a result of 7 years of entering the homecoming parade with various art bikes and eventually shaping that into what has now become our kinetic derby. So this first photo is kind of a primer and a teaser. This young lady at the time was, I think, like 4 years old. She was going to enter the derby. Her mom, I'd met her at the Bull, the local bar that I always end up at. She was doing something called self-narrate, and she was telling a story about how she was an artist. I was like, hey, we need artists for this event we're going to do. Come to find out, she had 3 kids, so it worked out great. And so I literally watched her mom frantically going, I'm a metal artist, though, I don't know how to do this. And in 30 minutes with her hairdryer, because she said, I'm not that kind of damn artist, so we're just using a hairdryer, took PVC, bent it into shape, and made what was basically a unicorn on this machine for her daughter. And her daughter was a butterfly princess unicorn, and the crowd went wild. So here's the problem with this. To get from this to an average kid having that opportunity is really tough. So if you look at this post from, I think it was May of 2016, the people in this picture are Raymond and Lorraine, who build a lot of the art sculptures that you see around town, the elephant, the gator, the horseshoe crab, which will be out next weekend, and a lot of others. He's an anthropologist by trade, but his father was an artist, so he trained with classical artists in New York. She actually went to fine art school at UF. And then the other people in this picture with us were all associated with Master Builder Camp, a STEAM education camp here in Gainesville. The reason why we met with them in early 2016 is we'd been talking to them throughout the year, during and after the first derby, about how do we create something that more kids can be involved in, that's more accessible to the general kid who doesn't have a parent who has that skill set. So that translated into, they found this great contraption. There's a guy in Tallahassee who's a retired engineer who built a kit that you can buy online or just the plans for, which is a PVC 2-person quadricycle. So 2 problems. One is PVC. It is not nearly as sturdy as it looks in the picture. 2, you know, PVC, the cement, that glues kind of forever. And so once those kids help you cut it at the right dimension and glue it together before you double check them, you're at the wrong angle for the rest of your life. So it's not necessarily perfect, but it's named the Awesome Possum, and it's a really great entry, and it was a really great addition last year because we got to capture what the kids were able to do. We got to understand, you know, in the summer of 2016 for the 2017 Derby, we watched them help measure, sometimes right, sometimes wrong. We watched them try to get their fingers in the blade as the PVC was getting cut. That was really interesting to watch and just kind of understand. We watched them go through the process of understanding how a simple mechanical structure works, right? They literally bought 2 bikes from Walmart to use the components off of, tore them down in front of the kids, and the kids, 95% of them, even with the second one still there as a model, could not make the association at 6 to 8 years old, which was the age range of what does this mean for us? Like, how do we make these parts back into that thing? And so figuring out what they were able to comprehend at different age levels was really important. So in the interim, a group of us, Lorraine and Raymond included, went to the 2016 Maker Fair in Orlando in October, and we met these people who had a Kickstarter campaign called Maker Pipe, and so they have these various connectors which are actually used for 3/4 inch EMT conduit, and that conduit's really important because having something that can go together, if a kid cuts it wrong, measures it wrong, if you need to do other things with it, it breaks down, right, which is really important. So then I started playing with SketchUp. Before someone convinced me at Hackerspace I should really try Fusion 360, so thank you guys. But I played in SketchUp and was like, what would this look like if we had 4 kids involved instead of 2, and the kids could actually ride it? and we could do all of these dream things. And so we came up with a 4-seat quadricycle that used mag wheels similar to what old BMX bikes used, or current wheelchairs, very similar to that. So then we had to figure out this propulsion, right? So we had to figure out how to transmit power to the rear wheels. And so we started doing really creative things. We cut apart bikes and we scavenged their bottom brackets. We took I literally went to every bike shop in town with a magnet and checked to see which of the head stems had 2 or 4 bolt patterns, or the pop top as they call them, that were actually still steel, and there are almost none. I think I have all of them in town and I only have 4, but that's a problem for another day. And so then here at Hackerspace, I actually had help from Cayman, and Chris helped a lot with 3D printing as well. We created some jigs for these, but this is actually, we landed on an ultra high molecular weight PE substance that would actually reduce the amount of friction, and we could use in place of a ball bearing, a pillow block bearing, to support on the back end these wheels and the drive assemblies. So this is it at my house. When we first got the first seat on, it was fabric, and we'll come back to that as an issue later. But basically you can see with a bunch of connectors, you can do some really cool stuff. These seats are really cool. The seats are the end goal, right? Because the seats get us to something that's amazing. You can fold it up, you can put it in a box, you can give this kit to a teacher in the end, eventually, and at the end of the year they can walk away from it for 6, 8, 12 months and then come back and do STEAM education again the next year. In the interim, a church down the road from me, while I'm struggling with this seat, throws out all of these kids' chairs. And like a fool, I keep a ratchet strap on my long-tail bicycle, and people just looked at me in the most amazing way as I ratcheted like 6 of these chairs to the back of my bike and just pedaled off, right? And they're like, that one's special. So that got me to 4 seats, and we modified them, and we created some stubs on the end so that we could actually just place them with some of those same connectors and shift them forward and aft, so that you could have some variability in the size of the child, or the not so fat overweight guy right there. But so then we had to come to this next problem, and so Frank and I'm sorry I'm late, we were actually looking for a interim solution. My long-term goal is actually to have cable steering for the front, but there are some rather specific challenges to that, both with the housing and how much tension it can take, and with the cable that we had itself. I've already snapped one and it's hit me in the face, and another one hit me in the arm, so it's probably not a good selling point if you have to tell mom and dads what might go wrong. So for now we're going to go with a more conventional rod steering for Saturday and then come back to this idea. But if this will work, oh no. Cable steering does work. Between me and Raymond helped me test it out because I didn't tell him there were things wrong with it still. That's what good friends do. So between the two of us, we're roughly 350 pounds. So if you figure 8 to 12-year-olds, that's probably all 4 seats filled, right? So specifically, this test was just to make sure that we had propulsion and that we could stop. We learned some things about using on an adapter for the rear shafts. We used a freewheel so that the 2 people on this side are in tandem, and then there's a second shaft for this rear wheel. 2 people on that side run in tandem, and so you don't have to stay continuously at the same speed. It's not as good as coupling them all together and using a rear differential, but for cost and time, efficiency, and some basic lessons for, you know, K through say 6th grade, it's really a lot of information. So then we met back with our friends from Master Builder Camp from 2016, and they started putting this on it. And there's actually a lot more detail that you'll have to come out Saturday to see, Saturday morning at 10. But so this thing's great. It actually will have some other appendages that will move, and the kids can move it with strings and ties, and so they get to learn how kinetics work in addition to the steering. This is my son, my great guinea pig. He's a lot lighter than me, and we're not going to say he's taller than me, but anyway, it brings out some real challenges. And so I put each of my kids on it, much to their chagrin, in the garage, and we tried to figure out what could go wrong, and there's a lot. here's the next step for me. There's a guy in town, there's actually 5 groups in town that do this, but there's one guy who I've been friends with for a while and met him through other friends. He makes these great things for festivals. This was actually for a street festival. And it's all light, it's all at night, so it's a little bit different, but I could really imagine seeing 4 or 5 quadricycles, say from the Hackerspace, going downtown during Art Walk just to screw with people's heads. I'm just throwing that out there, guys, no pressure at all. But this thing is great, right? Because this is what that became, or vice versa. This thing is nothing more than some conduit itself that actually all drops down onto just a standard, outdoor utility rolling cart with some plastic on top of it. The reason I showed you that is because this thing is actually made out of fabric. It's fabric and paint and some light inside. And so if you think about what the next iterations for a kit that you could give to a K-12 system to teach them, science, technology, engineering, math, and even some physical education, since they will be the motors, one of the biggest problems is space in the off season. And so if you can build fabric setups that kind of clamp on, that go together, there's this weird idea in my head that if you could fold it all up and drop it somewhere for 6 months at a time, you could get this in a lot of classrooms. And imagine if every school in Alachua County had just one kit. There would be 23 entries. If every school had one for every grade, they would have enough to have their own parade. So think about that, and think about that, what that would mean for the kids. And so it all kind of comes back to this. In the late 80s, I was actually a kid, believe it or not, with this bald head. It was bald then too. But I remember this A-team thing, right? And I think part of me, when I was thinking about this presentation, it was all about, this thing was called a playhouse, and my mom didn't tell me. I only found this out when I started researching what the hell this thing was. I just remembered there were these little pieces of plastic, and there were these little connectors, much like those ENT connectors, and you had to put them in the right order, and then you threw this kind of vinyl-y plastic thing on top, and it had semi-clear windows, and you could see out, and you could be B.A. Baracus, or one of the other losers. But whatever that was, you got to be the guy you wanted, and it was in your imagination, and it was in your head, and so you built this thing, and then you built a world around it. And I think for me, the quadricycle kit project is about giving kids that same experience while meeting some of their curricular needs and actually building them into the community. So come out to MIM Kinetic, the Menagerie Motion Kinetic Derby, this coming Saturday at 10 a.m. in Depot Park, and check this out and all the other entries. It'll be at Gainesville Mini Maker Fair after. I think Chris has already spoken with you guys about that. So you can speak to us more about it. You can see it up close. You can kind of understand how much it would break down and where we still need some assistance in figuring out how to make it more rigid and more compact and actually more usable by kids. So questions?
How do you get Ackerman geometry with cable steering?
I talked to Frank.
There's an issue with that.
So far, we're still working on it.
Okay.
Other questions? Awesome.